the AH-1 Cobra in Warthunder. One of the first dedicated helicopter gunships ever built that is used until this day. They sting harder than what they're named after. Just like the Cobras in real life, the older they get, the more dangerous they become. Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Bob Dickinson and welcome back to another Warthunder review. Today we will be reviewing the AH-1 Cobra helicopters in Warthunder. But before we do that, let's talk about its history. Picture this. 1960s. Vietnam War. The Huey helicopter was born for the sole purpose of medevac, troop transport, cargo, etc. Later on throughout the years, they also gave it additional rockets and ATGMs as well, to perform as a gunship too. But what if we could make a helicopter that was dedicated to the gunship role? Introducing the AH-1 Huey Cobra. The weapon that started all. The weapon that changed battalions and divisions, and the course of conflicts in history. It started as nothing special. Several Mighty Mouse rockets with two miniguns on a chin-mounted turret. But as time went on, the AH-1 Cobra was trying to be more relevant by having air-to-ground missiles, or even in some occasions, air-to-air missiles as well. The Cobra helicopter in some countries are still in service to this day, including the most upgraded and one of the best models of the Cobra, the AH-1Z. And of course, some dumpster fire by the name of Tzefa 300. There are 4 types of Cobras we currently have in the game. The basic models, which include the AH-1G and Tzefa A, the early models, which include the AH-1E and AH-1Q, or Tzefa B, the late models, which include the AH-1F, AH-1S and its premium counterpart, the AH-1S Kizarasu, and the Tzefa D/E. And finally, the fully modernized version, which is the AH-1Z and the AH-1W. Now I know a lot of you guys have requested for the AH-1Z, but we're going to keep this vehicle out of this video, because the AH-1Z is so modernized that it literally deserves its own video in the future. Also, I'm waiting for Gaijin to modify the AH-1Z to its real-life counterpart, because as of now, the AH-1Z is lacking AGM-65 Mavericks, AIM-92 Stingers, radar pods, modernized Hellfires, including the K Hellfire, the L Hellfire, and of course, last but not least, we still haven't got the modernized cockpit of it. And of course, the AH-1W, which is one of the major models of the Super Cobra. Let me tell you, I'm talking like Zuni Mark 32s, tow missiles, and Hellfires, both of them. It feels like an AH-1Z, but it doesn't have the same fully articulated rotary system. It's something in between like the standard Cobra and the AH-1Z. It's something in between. I'm kind of waiting for that as well. Now, let's talk about the armors and modules. Welcome to the Armor and Modular Protection Analysis, where we basically analyze the armors and modules inside of a vehicle. Today's aircraft is the AH-1 Cobra family of helicopters. As always, the first thing that we need to take a look at is the crew. Now hear me out, this is going to be a little bit complicated, but we're going to list them all out fairly easily so you wouldn't get confused. Now every single Cobra has a pilot and a gunner. The basic model of the Cobras have almost nothing except for maybe night vision on the American AH-1G. They have some of the most basic armaments as well, such as Mighty Mouse rockets with a chin turret with either 2 miniguns or 2 grenade launchers. The early model will allow you to install tow missiles on your helicopter. However, the AH-1Q or the Tzefa B will only have an additional RWR and NVDs, and that's pretty much it. But when you go a little bit higher, you will start to see some major upgrades. For example, the early model Japanese AH-1E will have CCIP on all of its armaments, including radar warning receiver and a brand new M197 20mm cannon, which will be standard on AH-1E and all models of the S and F and Tzefa D/E. Then of course, once we go higher, things get much more interesting. The late model helicopters all have upgraded tow missiles and radar warning receivers. There are some exclusive features on some Cobras as well, such as the Tzefa D/E having the missile approach warning system with IRCM and 60 countermeasures, while the American Cobra only gets the IRCM. And of course, the Japanese having none of that except for the countermeasure. The thermal sights are only available on the American AH-1F, Japanese AH-1S and its premium counterpart, and the Tzefa D/E. The late helicopters also get the Hydra 70 rocket pods, which the Japanese Cobras don't receive. I will explain the armaments a little bit further into this video, but for now, let's have a look at the fuel tanks that they can carry. Generally, the module placement for these helicopters are all pretty much the same, except for some minor differences here and there. Now, all the Cobras will have access to 2 self-sealing fuel tanks with these fuel presets. The fuel capacity can differ from model to model. The Tzefa A and AH-1G got the same fuel load, while the AH-1F/S and its premium counterpart got more fuel load. The Tzefa D/E has less fuel load than the previous group by 3 to 10 minutes, but unfortunately I don't have that helicopter, so you have to figure that out by yourself. Honestly, the fuel consumption of these vehicles are quite average, and they have your stereotypical attack helicopter amount of fuel. Nothing really special and nothing really impressive at all. And even if you're set on fire, I'm sure that the fire extinguisher will be your good friend, since all these helicopters do in fact have fire extinguishers. These helicopters have 2 types of engines. The Lycoming engine T53L13, which is installed on the early Cobra models including Tzefa A and AH-1G. This engine is quite similar to the UH-1 Iroquois engine, the T53L11. This engine on the Cobra is pretty decent, however, it has several problems that must be mentioned. This engine really lacks power if you're stock, or if you're carrying heavy amount of rockets, so you have to fiddle with the collective pitch a little bit in order to make it work. And it might be even worse when you have the stock engine upgrade. And the next one is the new improved Lycoming T53L703. Installed on almost all of the Cobras. Now this engine is a major upgrade compared to the previous one on the AH-1Gs. They stutter much less and they're much more comfortable carrying heavier armaments such as 8 tow missiles and hydro rocket pods. But overall, these engines are very reliable and do not stutter as hard as the Allison engines seen on the other competitor helicopters like the BO-105s. They don't lose a lot of RPM when you kick in the collective pitch too much. However, there is only one problem with these helicopters regarding their maneuverability, and it's with their rotary system, which I will talk about a little bit further into this video. At the end, you have the oil cooling system, traction of the control surfaces, transmission, and the prop shafts. In general, the Cobra helicopters are relatively thin compared to the Iroquois, Mi-24, or even the BO-105s. They have a powerful engine and they're relatively decent regarding their weight. And armament-wise, they're quite decent and something you can rely on. Now let's get on with the armaments. With the first one being the Folding Fin Aerial Rockets, or FFAR Mighty Mouse rockets, installed on the AH-1G, Tzefa A and B, and the all Japanese Cobras. Next up is the 2.75-inch M247 Hydro rockets, installed on the AH-1F and Tzefa D/E. These rockets are installed on all of the pylons available for these aircrafts, both 17 and 19 pod variants. Now, to be honest, I did not felt that much of a difference between the Mighty Mouse and the Hydropods, except that maybe the Mighty Mouse rockets have a little bit of a shorter range and are slightly slower, to the point that you can barely even make the difference between them. They have the same penetration and same explosive mass, with the most major differences between them are in their length, with the Hydro rockets being slightly longer than the Mighty Mouse rockets. The Mighty Mouse rockets on the early Cobras, such as the AH-1G and Tzefa A, are installed with a higher angle than the rest of the Cobras. This, depending on your experience and what type of player you are, can have different outcomes. It can either absolutely ruin your experience because these angles are only exclusive to the AH-1G and Tzefa A helicopters, or you can have a blast and destroy most of the ground units anyways. Now, rockets aside, let's have a look at the ATGMs that these helicopters can carry. Generally, the ATGMs on these helicopters will not appear until you get out of the basic models. And the ATGMs you carry are nothing really special, and they're quite decent and teach you the basics of how to control an ATGM. With the first one being the BGM-71C Ito, installed on the American AH-1F, Japanese AH-1E and the Tech Tree S version, and the Israeli Tzefa B and Tzefa D/E. The Ito is one of the basic missiles you can see in mid-tier helicopters. They have decent amount of speed, penetration, and explosive mass, with a somewhat low range and slow maneuverability compared to its competitors. It's not the best ATGM, but it can punch pretty decently and it actually does the job for you. Up next is the BGM-71D TOW-2 missile, installed on the American AH-1F, Japanese AH-1S and its premium counterpart, and the Israeli Tzefa D/E. This ATGM might actually trick you into thinking that it's nothing really special and is not much of a major upgrade compared to its previous one, maybe because of its maneuverability or the range that it has, but don't get fooled by it. This ATGM is a major upgrade compared to its predecessor. It has almost 200mm of extra penetration, almost twice the explosive mass, and of course it has electronic countermeasure, meaning that it's resistant to jamming from things like the Shtora on the T-90. Overall, a much more punchier missile than the previous one. And last but not least, the 7.62 M134 minigun, available on the AH-1G, Tzefa A, AH-1E, and AH-1S and Kisarasu, and the M195 20mm Gatling cannon, available on the AH-1G and Tzefa A. There could be some armaments that we can also use in the future, such as the Mavericks, the Zuni Mark 32 rockets, or even Stingers on future Cobras, but as of now, these are the only armaments that these vehicles have as of this video's production. Now let's get on with the mobility of these helicopters. When it comes to the mobility of these helicopters, they are quite interesting. The AH-1 Cobra has a semi-rigid rotary system, and the semi-rigid rotary systems in general are much more limited than something like fully articulated or fully rigid rotary systems. The main blades are not as maneuverable as you expect, and sometimes it can also force you into this weird nosedive when you reduce the collective pitch at high speeds while pressing the W at the same time. If you ever try to do acrobatic maneuvers with this helicopter, you will actually realize the problem. You can't do barrel rolls, you can't do front flips or back flips unless you're using full collective pitch almost all the time, and overall it feels like you're in a cage rather than a helicopter. And this type of rotary system is applied on almost every single Cobra helicopter except for the Viper, which is much more maneuverable than your standard Cobra. Other than that, the mobility is fairly decent and the top speed allows you to go to some decent speeds, albeit not the best. The pitch control is mediocre, the yaw control is pretty good, and the roll rate is not really that great. And one more mechanic which still hasn't introduced into the game, but if it did, it would tamper down its low G maneuverability and force you to ask twice before doing any extreme maneuvers. And it's called mast bumping. This is a semi-rigid rotary system, commonly found in the AH-1 Cobra and Huey helicopters. The semi-rigid rotary system looks relatively close to a seesaw. I will talk about the rotary systems in a much more detail on a different video. But for now, mast bumping occurs when the main inner rotor hub of the helicopter contacts and damages the main rotor mast or the prop shaft. This contact does severe damage to the mast and in most cases totally detaches the rotor from the helicopter, and you're going to expect to fall down like a rock. There's also a possibility to strike your tail as well, depending on your input or the weather turbulence. This mechanic is not available in Warthunder as of this video's production, so feel free to low G maneuver your Cobras and Hueys as much as you want. And this is one of the reasons why I would like to say, fuck Robinson R-44 helicopters. Stupid Burj Khalifa on top. But overall, the mobility is decent, but quite limiting in my opinion. Now, let's get on with the final verdicts. Welcome to the final verdict. In this section of the video, we're going to discuss if these helicopters are worth the grind and should you spade them or not. With the first one being the American AH-1G. I'm gonna be honest with you, the first time I got the AH-1G I was not really happy with it, because it didn't have ATGMs and CCIP for its rockets. I know, skill issue. But overall the AH-1G is a very nice helicopter that you can use as a beginner. It has reliable grenade launchers, nice amount of rockets, and it's not that slow compared to Hueys or Alouettes. Verdict? Get it and spade the hell out of it if you want to. Or if you really didn't like the AH-1G, you can also go and research the UH-1B with the SS-11 missiles or the UH-1C with TOW missiles. It depends on you. Up next is the American AH-1F. This vehicle is sitting at a decent position, and it is after the TOW-mounted UH-1C. The previous helicopter should give you an idea on how TOW missiles work in general. The American AH-1F leads to two helicopters, either the AH-64 line or the AH-1Z line. There's a possibility that we might see the AH-1W between the AH-1F and the AH-1Z, but that's gonna be a while for that to come. Even though in heli PvE you might struggle since you're fighting against the other top tier helicopters. Verdict? Get it and spade the hell out of it. Trust me, you will need it for grinding the AH-64A and the Viper. Up next is the Japanese AH-1E. Now this one is fairly interesting. You get CCIP on all your weapons with TOW missiles including the 20mm cannon. Much better armaments compared to its previous helicopter, which only had 38 Mighty Mouse rockets with essentially no CCIP. But overall, this helicopter feels like a breath of fresh air. It's just that the price tag might actually shock you a little bit, and you realize you have to grind all of that using one of the hardest helicopters to play. I mean, not to me at least. Or I don't know, maybe you could just pay Gaijin and shave off the pain. I mean, I'll talk about the premium a little bit later. Verdict, get it and spade the hell out of it. Should it really get it and spade the hell out of it? I really don't know. Up next is the Japanese AH-1S. On this helicopter, you have additional TOW 2s, which you really can't grind separately. You have to get the 2 ITOs first. And you have thermals this time, giving you better visibility. And you have to grind an additional 380,000 RP with 1 million SL, and you have to stock grind everything again. To me personally, why did I sound like Kermit there? Yeah, to me personally. Now the verdict on this one, I have to say, it must be optional depending on your situation. If you play ground RB, absolutely get it. But if you just want to play the heli PvE, get it, but don't spade it if you don't wanna. The next one is the Japanese AH-1S Kizarasu. This one is basically the same thing as the AH-1S, but without the ITOs. And you can purchase it with 7,130 Golden Eagles. It is absolutely cheap, yet it significantly helps you with the grind. And if you want to become a Japanese main or just have fun in heli PvE while the K50 is not allowing you to do so, verdict, highly recommended. Now you might wonder why there is an anime girl on this helicopter. I don't know, maybe it's probably from like Dragon Balls or something. I don't know, I just don't watch anime that much. And even if you're allergic to anime, you can pick the normal camouflage and have fun with it that way. Now let's go towards the nation of the Sacred Land, but before we begin, Tzefa, or in Hebrew, is translated as Viper. Anyways, let's have a look at the first helicopter, the Tzefa A. This is the starter heli on the tech tree that you want to grind. That I totally can't mention the name, cause there are people that are monitoring my YouTube channel. And it is no different than the AH-1G in the US air tree, it's just that it lacks NVD, but in compensation, it gets a much more aggressive exhaust. This time though, you have to grind its tow variant for 360,000 RP. Jesus Christ. And if you can handle some decent amount of grind just like the AH-1G, yeah, sure, you can make it work. Because the next one will be a decent treat if you want to play heli PvE. Verdict, get it and spade the hell out of it. Up next is the AH-1Q or the Tzefa B. This helicopter is located after the Tzefa A and is bad and a good choice at the same time. Good because this thing has 8 TOW missiles at low BR heli PvE matchmaking. Bad for the amount of grind you have to do in order to get it. Overall, in my opinion, it's one of the best helis in heli PvE, if it's not in the top tier matchmaking. And also it's in rank 6 as well, meaning that you can grind Petten without touching the Tzefa D/E. Verdict? Get it and spade the hell out of it. And last but not least, the Tzefa D/E. This helicopter is the best Cobra we have as of this video's production. Also, if you don't count this one. And to be honest, I'm not gonna recommend it if you're playing the heli PvE. Yes, you get the missile approach warning system and thermals and all the bells and whistles, but you're going back to the high tier heli PvE matchmaking where Camovs and Apaches dominate the battlefield, and let's be honest, are you sure you want to grind this entire thing again? If you do, then yeah, absolutely go for it. This helicopter is quite decent when it comes to ground RB as well. It's not a bad helicopter in any shape or form, it's just that I'm taking shortcuts in order to get every single Apache in the game. Verdict, get it, but spading it is optional. The AH-1 Cobras are interesting aircrafts to fly with. Despite their basic airframe and overall simplified design, they have been here for a long time. And I don't think it's gonna retire anytime soon. That being said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. If you want to, you can join my membership, like the video if you did, and subscribe to my channel. Dislike it if you dislike it. This is me, Bob Dickinson, signing out.